Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the L1 show. It is December 10th, and we're here with government and security stories to start your week in this happy holiday season.
First story is good, I guess, but perhaps a little limited. And boy, is this late.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't the time to have done this be before this system existed? And also, you got to think that this vacuum is going to be filled relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? Yeah.
The NBC News headline is FTC has taken action against companies accused of unlawfully tracking and selling location data. And I love the quote, the subheadline quote is surreptitious surveillance by data brokers undermines our civil liberties and puts service members, union workers, religious minorities, and others at risk. Well, just literally everybody. But also, this headline could just as well read as FTC takes action against leaded gasoline. Like, about a century too late there, FTC.
Better late than never.
But we all got some benefit from leaded gasoline, and then we got cheap gasoline.
That's a glass half full way of looking at it.
You didn't have the engine knocking. That was good for all of us. I don't think this is good for all of us.
No.
There's literally no benefit for the common man.
I guess car owners, not all of us. I love the name of this company, although I hate them. They are Gravy Analytics.
It's all gravy.
But why is this, to your point, like, why is this data valuable in the first place? Like, what sort of nefarious thing have they figured out from this data that makes it that someone is willing to pay for it?
Well, I think this paragraph will answer your question.
Some of their consumers include federal law enforcement agencies and the Department of Homeland Security, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the IRS.
Isn't it weird that one arm of our government is banning this, and then a bunch of the other arms are stuffing it in their pockets?
We really do have, once again, the theme this week is don't build the back door. But also we have some incredible examples of things that have gone wrong when the back door is there and exists and is a thing. And we also have a lot of, we covered it before, but it's probably worth rambling about again really quickly, is like Backpage. Remember Backpage, the Backpage website? We covered this in 2018 or 2019, I think. They shut down because it's like, there could be adult activities running here. And
in fact, there were. To be fair.
Yeah, but law enforcement didn't have full access to everything. And then LavaBit, it's like, LavaBit needs to be shut down because we can't surveil everything. And LavaBit was perfectly willing to say, okay, which 5 people do you want to surveil? We'll help you do that. And they're like, no.
We want everyone, yeah.
Yeah, we want to be able to decrypt all of your communications. We want to build the back door, in other words. And so this also looks like, these applications, access to these libraries would be one way to backdoor some of the information from these things. It's kind of the same thing, but kind of different. And not only is there a commercial need for commercial companies, but you can also get some commercial incentive from governmental interest as well. And so that is disturbing on 2 different levels.
Now, Gravy was not the only victim here. They made some sweeping rules. I don't know if they're in effect yet, but they said, hey, everybody who deals data is going to have to cut certain columns from those databases, like social security number. Hey, you shouldn't be ever collecting and storing in data a social security number. Like, that's a real risk, right? I think driver's license number, there was a couple of them. Here we go, yeah. Social security, phone numbers, financial data.
I've got some bad news for you, FTC. These companies are already way ahead of you. There's a one-way hash for social security numbers, which will uniquely, well, it's not really a one-way hash, but you can take a bunch of different data sources that have a social security number associated with them, hash it, and then you're still able to compare records from different databases without directly sharing the social security number.
Now, last week we learned that Chinese hackers, was Salt Typhoon, I think was the name of it, are in
what a name.
All of the, well, that's what we named them.
Yeah.
They're in all the telecommunication companies, all of them. How did they get into all of them simultaneously? Well, there was a really convenient backdoor that the government built into the telecoms so they could spy on us.
For surveillance, yeah. You remember the LavaBit thing I was just rambling about? There's we don't have that for your email service where we do for literally everything else. We need it.
This is what they do with it.
So now the Chinese are in there. Well, not the Chinese, at large, but some
Just
of the
the
Chinese.
entire nation, the children, the adults, like everyone, someone's grandma.
And we can't get them out.
The media falls into that.
Yeah.
Like it's the Russians. I don't think a lot of Russians are into that whole thing going on over there. But the point is, they're in there and they're like, we can't get them out. So you would think the obvious solution there is like, well, let's turn that off, right? Like, let's
Close the door.
Yeah,
Let's get rid of the door.
the back door.
Just put a drywall over the door.
That's not the solution they came up with.
U.S. officials urge Americans to use encrypted apps amid unprecedented cyber attack. The FBI and the CISA officials say that it's impossible to predict when the telecommunication companies would be fully safe from interlopers.
Never, because you won't fix it.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you, though. The last time the FBI and CISA told us about encrypted apps, what did they say?
We shouldn't have those because there's no backdoor and because they can't be surveilled.
Nothing bad will ever happen.
Seems to have come full circle. And here's another terrifying thing, because when the backdoor does not exist, some construction will take place.
Federal court says that dismantling a phone to install firmware isn't a search, even if it was done to facilitate a search. That seems like some really, really, really strained logic there. That's perhaps even worse than, well, I just want to grow some corn to feed my hogs on my own farm. Oh, that sounds like interstate commerce.
So, unfortunately, as is always the case here, you set the precedent with a case that involves an Adobe file format. So this fella had 52 devices filled with PDF files. And one of those was an iPhone. But it was inoperable. It was broken. But they really, really wanted to know what was in there. So they sent it to the FBI, who transplanted all new electronics into it. Just kept the storage. It was a ship of Theseus phone, basically. Gave it back, and they were like, I think you can search it now. And they did. And that's okay. That's not a warrantless search. Also, these warrants, they seized devices, couldn't crack them for 2 months, applied for an extension. The judge gave them a 6-month extension. Couldn't crack it during that 6 months. Applied for another extension. Granted. During that latter 6 months, they were able to do this.
Imagine you're the person like that comes across your desk and it's like, what am I doing? We just need you to just completely rebuild the phone.
They don't question it.
But again, okay, even as a worst case scenario, it's like, okay, this is the thing that happened. This is still better than Apple maintaining a replica of all of your stuff, and then they can just say, hey, send us Bob's files. Which would be way easier, but we're not there yet. Not quite. We're close. We're this close. We're paper-thin tissue away from that being a required thing. They're not willing to go fight Apple for that, but they were willing to go fight LavaBit for that.
But the Department of Defense is worried. They're worried that now the tools for deception have become widely available, and they don't like that.
U.S. Department of Defense is investing in deepfake detection. They've gotten some things that they can't tell if it's real or fake, and they need some technology.
This, I don't remember the name of the company, but they...
Hive AI.
Yeah, Hive. They say Hive is one of the better ones, but even then, probably not going to solve the problem entirely.
It's an arms race. If you have any experience with spam, it's like, I'm getting some spam. Let me get some better spam filters. Oh, now I'm getting some spam again. Let me get some better spam filters. Oh, I'm getting some spam again. It's like that, but with AI.
It's terrible.
And if you come into the public eye, suddenly you get a big headline, big position, your phone is going to be hacked. That's just the reality of the world that we live in.
Kash Patel, Trump's pick to lead the FBI, has been hit with an Iranian cyber attack, sources say.
What a cool name.
They already got all the stuff.
How does that guy not have like a $sign?
Yeah, Cash with a K.
Yeah.
It should be but it should be subtle, like a little pin on his lapel.
Instead of the flag.
Yeah. Cash Money Patel.
I seem to recall that was a thing in Idiocracy.
And New York's getting some new laws out there, which seems to be in response to the overwhelming crime wave that they're experiencing.
New York law mandates companies disable service for stolen cell phones. I thought this was a thing that just happened, but no, it turns out this is not a thing that just happens. It can happen with Apple devices, the Find My iPhone kind of a thing, but sometimes those cell carriers, they'll just keep right on doing stuff.
Also, even if you don't have service on your phone, I watch a lot of police interrogation videos, and one of the questions they ask them is like, what's your phone number? One of the most common answers is Wi-Fi only. In other words, that's a stolen phone, and I can only use it when I'm on Wi-Fi. But you think about in New York, you probably got a pretty good like if you
Signal everywhere, yeah.
If you learn some free networks and get the passwords in there cached, you'd be all right. And sad times. This poor fella just can't win.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk loses his bid to get his $56 billion pay package reinstated. The wild, we covered this in the past, but to catch you up till now, the wild thing about this is that the company gave him a set of impossible tasks and valuations. He completed them, and an activist investor said, "Wow, this is crazy. We should not pay you $56 billion. Well, isn't that worth more than like Ford Motor Company at this point?
But he also had them vote at the shareholder meeting.
And they said, okay.
And they voted yes.
Yeah.
And this judge said, no, I don't like you.
Yeah, and it's a Delaware judge, too. So this is odd. This could mean that Delaware is not a great place to incorporate your company because the shareholders wanted to do this, even if it was ill-advised, and the judge was just like, no, this is too unusual.
In fact, no longer incorporated in Delaware.
Yeah.
Now Tesla and SpaceX incorporated in Texas. It's going to cost them some tax dollars, huh?
Imagine, I can't even imagine that amount of money.
But because the Tesla stock has rocketed up now because he's like,
Right.
going to have power, he's made all the money back. So he's fine. His kids will have a nice Christmas.
Well, thank goodness for that. That was what I was really worried about.
Have
All
his kids
30
ever
of them.
not had a nice Christmas?
I mean, I'm sure they'll have a nice Christmas. They won't be seeing him.
No, yeah, say they'll be with the nannies and maybe their moms, but
And we have been saying this about China, and this, the turnabout is fair play, I guess, right?
U.S. chips are quote-unquote no longer safe, Chinese industry bodies say in latest trade salvo. This could be a bid to bolster domestic chip purchasing, but they basically think that...
well, this is just another slap in the slap fight between the U.S. and China.
Yeah.
But perhaps a little stronger slap. This one might have been a closed fist,
Oh.
because this might matter a little bit more.
China bans exports to U.S. of gallium, germanium, and antimony in response to U.S. chip sanctions.
That'll roll the quarters in their fist.
That is really bad.
It's antimony. Don't comment. Actually,
Antimony.
you should comment, because I shouldn't correct that, right? Just let them correct.
Let it happen.
Engagement challenge.
It's fine. The only reason I say antimony is because of the Element song.
The what song?
The Element song.
Oh. I'm pretty sure it's antimony, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I'm not sure. I can't pronounce.
Comment what you think it is.
Cement.
There's also a vocal minority that really takes issue when I say, I've forgotten the word. I intentionally pronounced it the most wrongest
Epitome.
way. Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah,
you've
yeah.
done,
You
you've
said
done
that.
hyperbole, too.
Epitome. Yeah, no, it's always like whenever I'm using like the nasal voice, like I'm trolling you. It's fine. Sometimes
But it
I'm not.
works.
Sometimes I'm just wrong and I'm not trolling you.
It works,
but
though.
In that case, it's like
Sneaking in something slightly wrong so people correct you.
Well, sometimes you are just wrong, and sometimes you are just right if you say things constantly. And China, I think, has nailed one here just because, how can this not be true, right? We know this is always true everywhere.
China sets the deadline for big tech companies to clear algorithm issues and close echo chambers. So basically, China is saying that we don't want everybody to agree on the wrong thing. And it's like, well, what's the wrong? Who decides the truth? It's like, obviously, we are the truth deciders.
Saw a little bit of that this week, didn't we?
Yeah, we sure did.
We'll talk about that later. And Indonesia is in a bit of a spat with Apple because Indonesia has rules about how much you have to invest in their country if you want to do business there. And they figured out that Apple was doing a lot of business, not a lot of investing. And Apple was like, we'll shave you off some of these crumbs, maybe. Give you a little bit of that. They're not having it.
Apple now needs $1 billion to lift the iPhone 16 ban in Indonesia. What was not clear from this article, though, is if you recall from the last time we reported on this, Apple was like, $100 million short on a $750 million investment. and they said, okay, we'll give you another 120 million. Is this them saying you need to go from 750 million to a billion, which would be like another $100 million of investment? Or are they saying that they need an additional 1 billion on the 600 million they've already invested?
No, I think this is in total.
Okay. They first offered 10 million to try to make, and then it's like, oh, they raised the bid to 100 million. But the 100 million was to just kind of make up for. They got close to what they promised to invest to begin with, but then it's like, okay, $1 billion is so they're going to come up with another 250 million.
So this says they would need to commit $1 billion in just 1 week. So I get the impression that it's on top of what they've already done.
Yeah, and this is also a longer term investment, so it's not like they have to invest $1 billion in a month. The original investment came down in like 2017, 2018, something like that. So
one of the things we talk about constantly here is not just the horrible state of our research papers and,
Things that should be public information because they're publicly funded or
which
not.
are, overwhelmingly publicly funded, just like our drugs. And you can't go look at it unless you pay a bunch of money. And when people try to make that free, the hammer comes down pretty hard on them. India has come up with a very good solution.
India takes out giant nationwide subscription to 1,300 academic journals.
1,000.
Or 13,000 academic journals. The deal allows scholars to read paywalled articles for free and will cover open access fees. Nice.
So if you've got the Indian equivalent of an EDU email address, hang on to that.
Oh.
That's got value. I assume that's how they would do it. I don't think everybody can sign up.
Maybe you can go to a library in India, and if you're at the library, you'll get free access
And
as
I
well.
think you have to be a
.edu.
student of some kind. I don't know if you have to have the EDU email address, but
Yeah, something
they said
like
it's
that.
only
yeah.
for students. They threw out some numbers there, and I know how many people are in India, and that does not match
Yeah.
that number. And over in the UK, they are still having the cloud wars.
Microsoft faces a £1 billion fine in a class action case over UK software prices.
So this has to do with if you are on Microsoft's cloud, you get Microsoft server software for free or greatly reduced prices. Whereas if you were on Google or Amazon, you might pay a little more.
You will pay a lot more.
And they feel that that is unfair advantage.
Microsoft has always been able to get away with that by saying when you're in our Azure cloud, you're renting the software, but when you're in someone else's cloud, you're buying the software or you're licensing the software for a longer term. And that, some discounts or volume or something happens, but I don't think they're going to be able to get away with it in this case. I think that Microsoft wasn't paying attention to how they were marketing things, and I think that's going to roast them alive in this case.
Now, this is maybe the third or fourth time we've seen a story like this. They explain why, but do you think this is a little fossil fuel propaganda?
Yeah,
maybe?
I did. Yeah.
I mean, again, they do give good reasons, but it seems like we could figure that out. Like, it's like this is kind of like having too much money, right?
Australia is struggling with an oversupply of solar power. The Tesla power walls that they deployed there have been very, very effective. And they know that they can't do away with other power production facilities because this is ephemeral, it's temporal. But right now, they've got an oversupply.
So the argument here is midday summer in Australia, they've got more power than they can't do anything with it. They've got too much. The argument is if we let that destroy demand for the existing plants that can keep us going in the winter and at night, do we lose that backstop?
Yes.
So what do you do about that?
You give people less money for solar that they weren't getting in the first place.
But, I mean, that doesn't nearly, it's already there.
More power walls?
Batteries are one of the suggestions they make, yeah.
It is kind of wild that they were able to turn that around in only 3 to 5 years because from what I remember from those older articles that we did, the Australian power grid had decades of neglect. And then Elon Musk rode in on his horse and was like, hey, we just add some batteries to this and it'll be fine. It'll buy you some time to make it less awful. And I can't tell that they've actually done anything to make it less awful other than just add a crap ton of batteries.
I think the market solved the problem. People were tired of losing power constantly,
So they got
put solar
yeah.
panels on their houses. Yeah.
I'm very close to that myself. If they weren't so expensive, I would perhaps already have them.
Isn't it funny that they don't need to be expensive because the world has too many of them? It's just that's being artificially controlled.
Actually, Krista, you can get used older solar panels that are not as efficient as the modern ones for basically the cost of just getting them shipped here.
Right, but then we have to hook them up and stuff. Like that's the other thing
Yeah.
is like figuring out who could do that and
Literally no
who's
one
just going to
around here.
take my money. Yeah.
You're going to have to pay someone from like 3 hours away to just live here for a week because nobody locally does it competently.
It's very expensive.
Well, let's take a little flashback and remember the time that Google's employees got a little uppity and started trying to make decisions that Google didn't like them to make. And they made it very clear that was not going to be tolerated. But maybe the employees weren't the only ones who had a bit of pause when it came to this.
The Verge's headline here is really like, just go read this. Internal Google documents reveal concerns about its cloud contract with Israel. The contract, called Project Nimbus, has been a flashpoint sparking protests by employees, Google lawyers, consultants, and apparently had concerns too. There's some interesting information here. It's an interesting perspective.
Now, this was what, 2014-ish? Oh, maybe it was 2021. I'm sorry. So that was before all the stuff that's happened over there. But they went through with it anyway. That means Nimbus is over there in the cloud right now, identifying targets.
In the cloud.
It's real. It's happening. They were right to be worried about it.
Well, I was reading this, and the whole time I was thinking about the exploding radios. Like, Project Nimbus is nothing compared to the kind of logistics tomfoolery required, for lack of a better way to describe it, to get exploding radios.
It's 3 a.m. and my pager's still blowing up.
Literally and figuratively.
And yeah, this is another article that I forgot to remove, but here we are. Let's talk about it again. It's worth repeating.
Telcos struggle to boot Chinese hackers from networks. We only know they're Chinese because they're coming from Chinese networks. But yeah, this is the lawful access backdoors. Like, this is all stuff that was built here deliberately. And
Oops.
I mean, we warned you. We warned you. I guarantee you, everybody at every level of the IT involved
There's so
in
many
this,
whistles being blown.
they were just, it's like, guys, don't do this. And the executive team was like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. They did not, in fact, figure it out. I mean, we need the Ron Howard narration to just be like, they did this to themselves.
And that whole surveillance technology, that mindset, if you're thinking that you're going to be, like the tech utopia is coming to replace all these horrible politicians, well, I wouldn't think that.
Employee lawsuit accuses Apple of spying on its workers. Spoiler alert, here it is. Here's more Apple doing the same thing. Now, this is really interesting too. The Apple employees realized that if they had a non-Apple owned device, that it would be much more difficult for Apple to do this. But Apple discourages that. They also realized that it would be somewhat harder if they had a work iCloud and a personal iCloud, and they would switch back and forth between the accounts. That was also discouraged. You were not supposed to have a separate iCloud account. It's like you just do everything in your iCloud account, and, it's fine. It was not fine.
Now, you might be thinking, well, what are they monitoring to make sure, like, maybe you work from home and they're, I don't know, looking at your screen or whatever? No, they're looking at everything, including location tracking 24/7. Apple always knew where their employees were.
Apple must protect its secrets.
I see you took a coffee date with Microsoft employees.
And this is an interesting one because actually in Eastern Kentucky, the dark mountains of Eastern Kentucky, we don't have Amazon drivers at all. I mean, we do here where we are, but it gets much worse as you go east. And so this is not that bizarre for us. However, this one's for a different reason.
Amazon faces lawsuit for limiting Prime deliveries in 2 Washington, D.C. areas over safety concerns. Yeah, they have also been limiting Prime deliveries in addresses not for safety concerns, just because they don't feel like it, because it's slightly more rural or slightly more of a headache, or we just don't do that on Fridays.
And those deliveries, like UPS generally serves that area, they'll take a week longer on average, I would say. And that's what happened here. And so the lawsuit is saying that Amazon didn't tell you that. They didn't tell you that you were in a dangerous neighborhood and they weren't willing to send their drivers in, or, they've been robbed 18 times already. They're not going to do it. So they do, like, the Prime delivery is prominent, right?
Yeah.
So there may be some merit there.
It's even more egregious than that. The people that signed up for Prime and then couldn't get Prime were told that, no, this is just a transient or ephemeral situation where there's just not enough shipping capacity for
So just keep your Prime account and keep paying for it, because one day it'll be resolved.
Yeah, but that was a lie. They were not being truthful in that response.
Don't you want to watch some of these videos? Look at the videos. They're free.
No,
Sure,
I don't want to watch your ads.
Sure, they have ads, but they're free. And we've talked a lot about Pegasus and the spywares, the NSO group, and all that horrible stuff. And for the most part, a common pleb like myself doesn't have to worry about that, right? Because I'm not important enough to hack. That's at least the narrative.
You should feel better about yourself. You are important enough to hack.
People want to hack me. It's like you're talking into the mirror. I'm good enough to hack. But this company came out with a tool, iVerify, that you can install, and it will check for these kinds of things, and they found something interesting.
A new phone scanner that detects spyware has already found 7 Pegasus infections. iVerify. I couldn't tell if this was this is something you got to be careful with, though, because do you trust iVerify to have access to your phone in order to verify that you don't have Pegasus?
They did explain how they do it, and it's not as invasive as Pegasus, but how can you root something that deep out without... Yeah.
It also talks about the supply chain attack, where it's at least one, maybe not one of these 7, but iVerify has detected malware coming from a fresh phone that they think was compromised on the delivery, between when you ordered it and when it arrived at your house.
Now, it's probably true that the kind of person who installs iVerify is weighted toward people who have a reason to be concerned about that kind of thing. But they reached out to some of these people, and they determined they were not as high profile as you might think. So maybe not your most common of proles, but not what you would think you would waste Pegasus money on. Right? It's very expensive.
It's do you really need to compromise Jeff Bezos, or can you compromise his personal assistant?
His nanny.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that would probably still be a target.
I think his kids are older, though, right? And here's an interesting one. I put this in the security section because, well, hopefully you can figure out why.
Researchers use AI to turn sound recordings into accurate street images. This one was kind of shocking, but it kind of makes sense if you think about it, and you have a data set that's like this. This will be great for intelligence agencies to be able to place where they're getting that anonymous call from.
Or the fact that everyone has a microphone in their pocket.
Yeah.
So if there's a microphone in your pocket, which they can turn on through a back door.
It doesn't even need, remember the aforementioned location tracking? It's I'm wandering around, playing Pokemon Go. What if we've got ambient sounds of literally all of those places that you were playing Pokemon Go at? Wouldn't that be the most incredible data set for this ever?
Are you telling me I have to sandwalk and also make loud noises while I sandwalk to throw the AI off?
No, you have to make fake bird noises and stuff.
While you're walking around in public.
You gotta change your bird noises to make sure it doesn't match any that are actually in the area.
Speaking of sandwalking, I don't know why this made me think of it. Whatever craziness is going on in Jersey, the conspiracy theory or whatever, they seem to be using GPS jamming because somebody I know is using GPS for their data center time setting, and that caused some problems because the location of the data center changed about 50 times last week.
Well, something else that changes without you knowing about it is your software, because supply chain attacks are now the most terrifying thing ever.
Solana Web3.js library backdoored to steal secret private keys, and it did, to the tune of, what was it, millions of dollars?
Was it that much? I don't know if this article even says, but they definitely got some. It worked.
Solana.js key stealer. Fabulous.
184,000.
Okay. Could have been worse.
And here's a company that was already probably not doing great. and probably suffering from some sanctions and so forth. But this might have been the nail in the coffin.
Stoli Vodka is filing for bankruptcy, and the ransomware attack was the last nail in the coffin. It's a fun statistic. I bring it up sometimes when we cover a ransomware case. A high percentage of companies that experience a ransomware attack have to file for bankruptcy or need between the cost of recovery and the fact that if you get ransomware, you are probably not doing things super by the book to begin with. Bit of an issue.
And here's another issue, because you don't know what's going on inside of your electronics. But we do know that many, many, many of the cables that are for sale in normal places where you'd buy them are not what they claim to be. And they could be something much, much worse.
USB-C cable CT scan reveals a sinister active set of electronics. The O.MG pin testing cable contains a hidden antenna and other stuff embedded in the connector, including a microprocessor and a controller. So you'd never know it's there. It looks like a completely ordinary cable. I think Linus did a video on this, or maybe an older version of this a long time ago. And this is an intelligence services, pinnacle achievement, basically, from 5 years ago. And it's commercially available now.
And this is not like, they're not condemning these people. These people built this on purpose the way it is. It's for testing. It's to show you what can be done. But Mossad, they might have their own version. Maybe the CIA has one of these.
Oh, yeah. So maybe it's like, don't use the airport.
Anything.
Charge cable.
You're just walking down the street. Somebody's like, hey, you need a ride? And they're like, oh, you want to charge your phone while you're here?
It was probably 15 years ago that when USB-C first started appearing, Google ordered a crap load of voltage-only USB-C cables. None of the pins were there except the ones that do power delivery. That was a special order because it's like, hey, you got your Android phones. People are probably going to try to steal stuff from Google employees. If you're going to use a public charger, use this cable so that there's no data connection.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, that was the last story of this batch. We will be back soon.
Tomorrow with business news.
Store.level1text.com. Bye.